Hello Year 9, this is Mrs Maloney here, and I'll be taking you through this week's lessons based on the play Romeo and Juliet. We're going to spend this week thinking about what happens when Romeo and Juliet meet for the very first time. We're going to be thinking about the language that Shakespeare uses, and we're also going to be exploring the structure of the play. So to start off with today, you can see in front of you a slide that has images of 4 different characters from Romeo and Juliet. I want to know from you, who are these characters? And I want you to think about how they feel about Paris's proposal to marry Juliet. So you could do a mind map on a piece of paper and just write down your ideas about this. If you have got your ideas and you think you know the answers to those, have a think about this question, the extension. Whose opinion should Juliet value the most and why? Pause the recording for a couple of minutes here and just jot down your responses to those questions. Okay, so hopefully you've got some of your ideas jotted down, but we've got some extra information here that you can use to add to those ideas. So do please make sure that you're adding additional information to your notes if there's things here that we're talking through or you're reading that you haven't recorded. So Juliet was the first character on the balcony there, and she accepts Paris' proposal. She's accepting of it, rather. She just wants to do whatever will please her mother. Juliet obediently accepts Paris's offer, but she's not passionate about it. Lord Capulet is glad that Paris wants to marry Juliet, and he gives his approval to Paris. However, Lord Capulet makes it clear that Paris must also win over Juliet as well. Lord Capulet loves his daughter and he wants her to be happy. And so although he's really pleased that Paris is offered is wanting to marry Juliet, it has to be right for Juliet as well. Here we have Paris, and he wants to marry Juliet. He's friends with Lord Capulet and he seeks his permission. He thinks that Juliet is very beautiful. Even when Lord Capulet says that Paris should also look for other women at the ball that night, Paris thinks he will still prefer Juliet. And finally, we have Lady Capulet, Juliet's mum. She thinks that her daughter should marry Paris. Lord Capulet says how handsome Paris is, and she also tells Juliet that she's not too young to marry. Lady Capulet had given birth to Juliet by her age, which is 13 years old. So we might be thinking, in our context, our modern times, that 13 is a ridiculously young age to get married, and in fact it is, isn't it? It's illegal in our country, and even if you get married at 16 you have to have permission. But in the time that Shakespeare was writing, it wouldn't have been unusual for wealthy women to be promised to be married to somebody else even whilst they were still quite young. So, in Act 1, Scene 5 of Romeo and Juliet, Lord Capulet is holding a masked ball at his home. He's invited all of his friends and family to the ball. However, Romeo, Benvolio and Mercutio have managed to sneak in, and as we know, they are from the Montague family. And we know that this is going to be problematic because the Capulets and the Montagues are sworn enemies, and we've already seen at the beginning of the play that they're fighting in the streets of Verona, they're spilling blood, and the prince has had to step in and threaten them with execution if they should continue to fight. So this is a very, very dangerous thing that Romeo and Benvolio and Mercutio are doing. All right. Luckily, because it's a masked ball, it means that they can cover their faces and no one will recognise them. You can see here we've got an image of what a masked ball might look like, and you can see we've got all these very glamorous ladies and people dressed in their finery and this kind of beautiful background setting with lots of lights and big windows, and it would have been held by wealthy people, people of importance like Lord Capulet. So it would be formal and exciting with music and food and drink, a bit like a party, I suppose, that we might have now. They were really popular in Italy during the time that Shakespeare was writing. People holding a masked ball would be powerful and wealthy, and they would be full of important people from the city and beyond. So we know that Paris is going to this ball, and we know that he's quite an important person. He is also of quite high status. The masked balls were an opportunity for families to show how generous and wealthy they were. And it would be a time for merriment and enjoyment. So similar, I suppose, if we were going to have a party in our times now, perhaps a bit more formal than that, but still that kind of idea to have a nice time with lots of music and food and drink. Importantly for us, this is also the scene where Romeo lays eyes on Juliet for the first time, and the moment where he takes off his mask and he first sees her shows where he falls in love at first sight. Now, lots of people over the years have talked about this idea of love at first sight, the moment that you first clap eyes on somebody. It's a bit like a thunderbolt from the blue, and you just know. And we have to remember that both Romeo and Juliet are very, very young. Juliet, as we know, is only 13, and Romeo is probably only about 17 or so himself. So there's lots of debate about whether it was love or infatuation, but at this point, when they first see each other, they are completely smitten and taken with each other. And that's a really important moment in the development of the play. So we're going to find out what happens to Romeo at Capulet's ball. And to begin with, Lord Capulet is welcoming guests to his home. Now, you don't have the book at home, so what I've done is on the next couple of slides, I've put the extract that we need to look at, and I'm going to read that out for you so you can follow it as we go through. So be prepared to click to the next slide and then listen and read the text along with me really carefully. Lord Capulet then is welcoming his guests to his place, to his house, for this grand masquerade ball that he's holding. And I'm going to read this through. Now, obviously, there's just me, so I'm going to have to read all of the parts. Normally in a play that wouldn't happen, but hopefully this will help you to follow the text on the slide as we read it through. Okay, so Capulet. Welcome, gentlemen, ladies that have their toes. Ah, my mistresses, which of you all, unplagued with corns, will walk about with you? Will now deny to dance, she that makes dainty, she, I'll swear, hath corns. Am I come near ye now? Welcome, gentlemen. I have seen the day that I have worn a visor and can tell a whispering tale in a fair lady's ear, such as would please. 'Tis gone, 'tis gone, 'tis gone. You are welcome, gentlemen. Come, musicians, play. A hall, give room, and foot it, girls. More light, you knaves, and turn the tables up, and quench the fire. The room is grown too hot. Ah, sirrah, this unlooked-for sport comes well. Nay, sit, good cousin Capulet, for you and I are past our dancing days. How long is't now since last yourself and I were in a mask? And Capulet's cousin replies, By a lady 30 years. And Capulet responds, What, man, 'tis not so much, 'tis not so much. 'Tis since the nuptials of Licentio, come Pentecost as quickly as it will, some 25 years, and then we mast. And Capulet's cousin replies, 'Tis more, his son is elder, sir, his son is 30. And Capulet says, Will you tell me that? His son was but a ward 2 years ago. Take your time with this. If you need to pause it and go back and re-listen to it and reread it, make sure you do. The language is quite tricky, so being familiar with it will really help you to understand what's being said. Okay, so now that we've seen and we've read and we've listened to that extract where Capulet is welcoming his guests, hopefully we've picked up that the tone of the scene, the feeling of it is meant to be jolly and merry. I want you to pause the recording in a second, and I want you to have a look through, and I want you to write down for me 3 quotations that show that Lord Capulet is in a happy and a generous mood. So you're going to look through the extract on the slide, and you're going to select 3 quotations, 3 examples, 3 words or phrases from the text that show Lord Capulet is feeling happy and generous. And then I'd like you to look at the language and think carefully about how the quotation shows its mood. So you're going to write a little bit of explanation to go with it. So make sure you pause now, write down your 3 quotes and a brief explanation of how the language you've chosen shows that Lord Capulet is happy and generous. We've got some examples here that you might have picked up on from the last slide of quotations and explanations that are showing Lord Capulet's mood, the fact that he's feeling happy and generous. So, as before, you can add some ideas to what you've already got written down if you haven't got them, and these will be useful for you to know, because it sort of sets the tone for the party. So at the beginning we have welcome, gentlemen, which shows, doesn't it, that Lord Capulet is making sure that people feel welcome and comfortable at the party. He says, which of you all will deny to dance? Sorry, I tripped over that. Which of you all will deny to dance? He's inviting everyone to dance. He makes it seem that not dancing would be strange. And this helps to make the guests feel more comfortable in dancing with each other. And I suppose dancing is quite a celebratory thing to do, isn't it? So he wants everyone to be having a lovely time. And then we've got this quote here, which starts, I have seen the day, and ends as would please. And he jokes that in the past he would have danced and flirted with the ladies, and he invites the men to do the same tonight and enjoy their evening. Give room and foot it, girls. We can see there's quite commanding language here, but it is in the spirit of fun, isn't it? He invites everybody to come in, and he tells the ladies to go and dance, make room for everybody. He says, more light, the room is grown too hot, and he wants basically there to be more space for the dancing, and for there to be room so that people can move, and for the room to cool down. There's obviously a lot of people there, and he wants to make sure that people are comfortable but can still continue to have a good time. And then we've got this conversation with his cousin, where he has and he's really good natured about it, but he's talking about the fact that it's been such a long time since they've seen each other, and how quickly it is that he's got old. So hopefully you managed to select some of those ideas and pick those out of that extract there, and you've got those written down. And if not, this has given you some ideas of things that you can add. Okay, so make sure again, pause the recording just at this point and just add any extra information that you think is really important to what you've already got. What I'd like you to do now is we have got 2 YouTube clips here. Okay, the moment that Romeo sees Juliet for the first time is one of the most famous in all of Shakespeare's plays, possibly in the world. This play has been reenacted and reinterpreted so many times, because it's arguably his most popular play. It's certainly one that I love, and most English teachers that I know also adore this play. So what we're going to get you to do is to watch these 2 different versions of this moment, okay? And then we're going to look a bit more closely at Romeo's words when he sees Juliet for the very first time. So I want you to pause the recording, and I want you to watch version 1. And we can see we've got the director's name, Zeffirelli. Now this is from 1968, so we're going back a little bit here. And this is a traditional production of the play, showing the style of the party at the Capulet's Ball. So it's sort of set in Shakespearean times, if you like, and it tries to pick up on those, the setting of that time. Version 2 is directed by Baz Luhrmann, and it was first released in 1996, which makes me feel incredibly old. This is probably one of my favourite films of all time, and I've watched it about 100 times and I love it still. It's a really popular, it's a modern version, and it's set in modern times. It gives it a modern twist. So you're going to pause the recording. I want you to watch both of these. You take your time, watch them 2 or 3 times if you need to, so that you're really familiar with them, okay? But they are focusing on the same moment, all right? Hopefully you've watched both of those versions. Be really interesting to pick up on in our live lessons perhaps which version you felt you preferred and why that might be. However, for now we're going to look a bit more closely at Romeo's words and what he says when he sees Juliet for the first time. Now again, we don't have copies of the play, but the text or the script, if you like, because it's a play, is on the next slide. So you can read it again along with me and you can follow the text as I read it to you. These are Romeo's words that he says when he sees Juliet for the first time. I'm going to read this, okay, so that you can again follow the text as I'm reading it to you, and you can see that we've got a bit of a task. So as you're listening, think about any phrases or metaphors that he uses to describe Juliet as light or bright. Here we go. Oh, she doth teach the torches to burn bright. It seems she hangs upon the cheek of night like a rich jewel in an Ethiop's ear, beauty too rich for use, for earth too dear. So shows a snowy dove trooping with crows, as yonder lady o'er her fellows shows. The measure done, I'll watch her place of stand, and touching hers, make blessed my rude hand. Did my heart love till now? Forswear its sight, for I ne'er saw true beauty till this night. Okay, pause the recording, reread the passage yourself, make a note, write down on your piece of paper any phrases or metaphors or even individual words that you think describe Juliet as light or bright. Okay, hopefully you've had a chance to reread and have a look in a bit more detail at Romeo's words. And what you can see here is we've got some language picked out which describes Juliet as being light or bright, okay? In the first line we have, she doth teach the torches to burn bright. In line 3, he compares her to a rich jewel in an Ethiop's ear. And then in line number 5, he calls her a snowy dove. Okay, we're going to spend some time looking a little bit more closely at one of these metaphors. So have a think about what a metaphor is. We should all know this, but just take a moment to have a think about what a metaphor might be. We're going to look a bit more closely at the metaphor in this line. So shows a snowy dove trooping with crows. So in this, Juliet is the subject. She is the thing that is literally being described here, okay? And she's being compared to a dove among crows. And if we look at our slide here, we can see we've got an image of a dove among some crows there. Now we need to remember that a metaphor is a comparison. It's a way of putting two things side by side in a figurative way. It's not literal, it's figurative. Why might Romeo compare her to a dove? Pause the recording for a minute and think about all of the things that you might associate with a dove. Hopefully you've had a bit of a time to think about what we might associate with this idea of a dove. So we've got this line, so shows a snowy dove trooping with crows. Juliet then stands out as beautiful and bright compared to every other woman he has ever seen. All of the other women he has seen are like ugly, coarse crows in comparison to Juliet. And the dove is also a symbol of peace and innocence, which Juliet represents to Romeo. A dove is white, and we often associate that with innocence, don't we? And if we look at our picture down here, we can see that putting the white dove in amongst the black crows makes her stand out as beautiful and bright. It's also the only dove there, which might make us think that Juliet is one woman in a million. Okay, so there's lots of different associations, lots of different ideas that we can infer based on this metaphor, and it really shows us what he feels about Juliet. So make sure that you've written some of these down in addition to the notes that you made before. In this speech then, Romeo refers and compares Juliet's lightness to Juliet as being light and bright. However, he compares and contrasts this lightness and brightness to things which are dark. So looking again at his words, can you now pause the recording and make a note of the phrases or metaphors which show Juliet being compared to something dark? We can see then that he uses some references to darkness in this speech as well. He says she teaches the torches to burn bright, and it seems she hangs upon the cheek of night. And then we have this line which we've looked at already about a snowy dove trooping with crows, and we've had our image of that, haven't we? The white dove and the black crows. In this passage, Shakespeare does something called juxtapose. He juxtaposes Juliet's bright beauty with dark images to show how much she stands out from any other woman that Romeo has ever seen. So make sure you've made a note of those images of darkness because we're going to talk about those and think about those in the next slide. So when we studied Jane Eyre, we looked at how Charlotte Bronte used juxtaposition. Hopefully we know already that juxtaposition is a literary technique where a writer places very different things or people close to each other. This helps to show how the things are similar or different. Okay, we've got this yin and yang circle at the top there, which is a really good example because when we put black and white next to each other, they make each other stand out, don't they? And that's a really good example of juxtaposition. So hopefully you remember from Jane Eyre, Bronte juxtaposed Mrs. Reed with Bessie to show how cruelly Jane was being treated at Gateshead Hall. At the end of Animal Farm, Orwell juxtaposed Napoleon and the pigs with the humans to confirm how corrupt the pigs had finally become. Your task now is to write a paragraph which responds to the following question. How does Shakespeare use juxtaposition to describe Juliet's beauty when Romeo sees her at Capulet Ball? Now, to make this a little bit easier, we've given you a statement to start your paragraph. And the statement is this. In this passage, Shakespeare juxtaposes Juliet's bright beauty with dark images to show how much she stands out from any other woman Romeo has ever seen. You can use that statement and you're going to write a C's paragraph. Now we should all be really familiar with C's. We've seen it many, many times before, and we're going to use those C skills to write a response which starts with the statement that we've just given you. On the next slide, we're going to just run through a little reminder of what C stands for and some sentence stems which you can use to help you to write your paragraphs. So we've just talked briefly about C's, and you've got your question, which we've put again here at the top of this slide. How does Shakespeare use juxtaposition to describe Juliet's beauty when Romeo sees her at Capulet's Ball? So just a brief reminder of what the C's structure is and how we put our paragraphs together. So we have our statement, and our statement needs to answer the question. And you can see that the statement that we've given you does answer the question because it talks about how Shakespeare uses juxtaposition. It talks about the fact that that juxtaposition is used to show Juliet's beauty and contrasts it with dark images, and it explains the reason why. So it kind of sums up the answer to the question in one statement. Obviously, and of course, you know by now, we can't just accept a statement. We need to have some evidence, and that evidence is a quotation that we take from the text to support our statement. It proves that we know what we're talking about. It backs up the point that we're making. So to find your quotation, you need to look back at the extract that we've looked at today and select a word or a phrase which links to this statement. We then need to make some inference, and your inference is what you think the quotation means or what it suggests. And good inferences often look at more than one different interpretation. So if you remember back to a previous slide, and we talked about how the dove represented peace and innocence, but we also talked about how it contrasted the white with the black to make Juliet look really bright and stand out. So already we've got two different things that we can say there. And that's what we want you to try and do in your inference section of your C's paragraph. We'd like you to try and zoom in to focus on a particular word. And we have to think carefully about what that word suggests, what that word implies or shows to us as a reader. Okay, so when you're writing your quotations, think carefully about which word carries lots of meanings and which word you can explore in detail. And then finally, the effect on the reader or audience. Obviously, because this is a play, we have to consider the audience because it's designed to be watched. So when you're writing your C's paragraphs, I want you to think really carefully about what Romeo's words, Shakespeare's words, would make the audience think and what they would make the audience feel. Okay, that's really important. And what you can see on this slide as well is we've also put some sentence stems to help you. Okay, so these are sentence stems that we'll have seen before, that we've used before, but this is just a reminder. So when you're writing your paragraph, we've already obviously got our statement, okay? But when you're looking for evidence, when Romeo says, and you can see we have to put our quote in quotation marks, we learn that. Okay, so you need to briefly explain what the quote means. And here you've got lots of sentence stems for your inference, which are things like this could be, or this suggests, or this implies, or I can infer from this that. And that's asking you to really think carefully about what you think the quotation is telling us. Again, we've got some zoom phrases here that you can use to introduce the word that you're going to zoom in on. And we've also got a stem here that will hopefully help you to write about the effect on the audience. Okay, so make sure that you're using those when you write your C's paragraph, answering the question at the top of this slide. Okay, so now is the time to pause this recording and have a go at writing your C's paragraph. Okay, off you go. To help you with your C's paragraphs, and hopefully you've had a go writing one now, we've given you some examples, and you can see we've colour coded them using the same colours that we have used previously, so that you can see where each element of C's has been used. We've got an example here, and this is so that you can do a little bit of self-assessment of your paragraph to see what you've written, to see if there's anything you can add, to see if you've followed this structure for writing. So we've got our statement which we've been given. In this passage, Romeo juxtaposes Juliet's bright beauty with dark images to show how much she stands out from any other woman he has ever seen. The metaphor of a snowy dove is juxtaposed against crows. The white dove is a symbol of peace and innocence, which Juliet represents to Romeo. Equally, crows can represent bad omens and death. The juxtaposition of these two birds emphasises just how superior Juliet is to all the other women at the Capulet Ball. Juliet is now one dove that he loves compared to the crows he has seen before. This might make the audience think that Romeo has never seen anyone quite like Juliet before, and emphasises how special she is to him, even in this short space of time. So we have a C's paragraph there. Take a moment now to look at yours and to think about what your inference section is like. Have you got some different ideas there? Have you zoomed in? Have you talked about the effect on the reader? If you haven't, take a moment to go back and improve and redevelop your C's paragraph. In a moment, we're going to look at a second one, so don't worry if you didn't write about this. We've got some other ideas coming up. Here you can see we've another example of a C's, which is based on the extract again that we've been looking at in today's lesson. And once more, we've colour coded it so that it fits the elements of C's that we would like to see you using in your analytical writing. That means when you're writing about language, okay? So we've got our statement here. Romeo also says that she's brighter even than the fires that light up the room. When he says she doth teach the torches to burn bright, he's suggesting that she is the brightest light, and so he's drawn to her. It could also suggest that the light she sheds on Romeo may make him feel like he can see new things. She can illuminate parts of him that he didn't know existed before. The noun phrase burn bright implies that she is warm and inviting like fire, and also that she outshines anyone else he has ever seen. This allows the audience to realise that Romeo feels she is a light in the darkness and is completely unique to him. So again, we've got another example of C's here. And once more, take a moment, pause the recording, look back at your own C's paragraph. What can you add? Can you write another one now? Are you able to develop what you've already got? Finally, for today's lesson, we've got a bit of a roundup, okay? So I'm going to read some statements about the quotation, which we've looked at in quite a lot of depth today. So shows a snowy dove trooping with crows, which is what Romeo says when he sees Juliet for the first time. You're going to think about and just write down which statements about this quotation are correct. Is it A, the word snowy shows that Juliet has melted Romeo's heart? Is it B, the word dove rhymes with love, which demonstrates that Romeo has fallen in love with Juliet? Is it C, the word trooping symbolises the fact that the Montagues are at war with Capulets? Is it D, the words dove and crow show how beautiful Juliet is compared to other women? Or is it E, the word crow suggests that other women are dark and ugly to Romeo's eyes? Pause the recording now and just write down the statements that best fit or best describe this quotation. Hopefully you picked out D and E. So the words dove and crow show how beautiful Juliet is compared to other women, and the word crow suggests that other women are dark and ugly to Romeo's eyes. Well done Year 9 for working through this lesson 7 of Romeo and Juliet with me today. Please do make sure that you go back and you reread or you listen again to anything that is unclear, and make sure that you email your teachers to ask any questions that you may have. Well done guys, and I'll speak to you again soon.